Good morning, friends. Welcome back to the farm. I'm still enjoying my cup of coffee way into the late morning, but that's all good, and still getting things done and getting things accomplished here around the farm. And one of the things on my to-do list today is to make some homemade bread. So today, let's talk about that. We love carbohydrates. We're not afraid of gluten. We praise the Lord, we don't have any allergies in the household when it comes to those things. So we love making our own homemade bread. And so I wanted to kind of break down some of the things that we like to do, some of our go-to recipes. Of course, we have our, everyday bread cookbook that we use all of those breads between, homemade pizza crust and homemade brioche buns and tortillas and all of that. But our go-to homemade breads, it goes between our homemade crusty bread and our sourdough bread, and both are favorites. And sourdough is all the rage right now, which is awesome. I love it. It's so good for you and it's delicious, and it really is one of my favorite breads. But we love our crusty bread just as much. And the title isn't that great, but the reason we call it crusty bread is because as soon as you pull that out of the oven, you can, take the loaf and like squeeze it, and then it just goes crunch, 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 and it's so good and yummy. I mean, it is equal in my mind with sourdough bread. It's so good. So we keep these homemade breads in the house almost all the time. They're our staples. Sourdough bread, it's a little bit more involved, and I think it's okay. Julianne is so good about, Julianne's my oldest daughter, in case you're new here. She makes all of our sourdough products here and sells her sourdough starter all over the country. Julianne is our sourdough girl. She does all things sourdough, and I love that, and I love seeing her kind of grow in that and enjoy that and discover new things with it. But our sourdough bread is a 2-day process at least, and when you're doing other recipes, of course, allowing it to ferment and do its whole thing is good and makes it more digestible and all of that. But sometimes you're just kind of in a little bit more of a hurry, and that's when our crusty bread comes into play. We can have a crusty bread loaf done in, technically 4 hours, but we sometimes rush that, and it turns out every time. It's very rare where we have it not turn out. We've even let it rise for only 1 hour. I'm just keeping it real that you can kind of cheat that system a little bit, even if you're in a rush and you want a delicious loaf of bread on the table for dinner, right? And I think specifically in the world that we live in today, and with the huge amount of allergies that people are dealing with when it comes to gluten and all sorts of things, I think knowing what's in your food, whatever you're making, even if you don't want to go down the sourdough path, but you want to start making your own homemade bread, whether it's in a bread maker or a bread machine, like kind of an easier way to do it, because the bread that is in the store almost all the time is super processed, and it's just, I think it's, our food system is broken. It's creating all of these allergies and all these issues in people's guts to be able to digest the food and be able to process it the right way. We do make so much homemade bread, but I also buy store-bought bread, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. We do a nice level of both. We're not fully one way or the other, but the reason why I would choose our homemade organic bread over this, which is the Brownberry organic 100% whole grain bread, is because this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20 ingredients in it, including natural flavors, which is not natural, just for reference. This is just my cheater bread, like when I need something easy. But it has soybean oil, vegetable oil, sunflower oil, et cetera, et cetera. It just goes on and on. But like I said, the natural flavor, just in case you're hearing this for the first time, if it says natural flavors, that's not natural. Do some research and see how many different ingredients can go into that single title of natural flavors. It's no good, and they don't have to be clean, and that's what's scary about it. So you have to start doing your research, or don't if you don't want to know the truth. But anyway, so I'm not hard and fast like that we never ever buy this. I'm telling you that we do sometimes, and I like being transparent with you all. But would I choose to make our homemade? Absolutely. When you're looking at the difference between 20 ingredients in this organic bread versus our, I've got my ingredients out on the counter back there. I'm going to show you how we put together our crusty bread, and Julianne's going to break down our sourdough bread for you. And she has great instructional videos. But let me see, 4 or 5 ingredients, you know, same thing with the sourdough, there's a huge difference. And I know exactly what I'm putting in it. I know I'm putting our raw honey in it. I'm not putting a processed sugar in it. I know where our flour came from and that it is organic, right? And all of that. And the beautiful thing with the crusty bread too is that you can, if let's say you prefer a certain type of flour, you can absolutely switch that out. We're using organic all-purpose flour today, but you can switch it out, and we're just gonna go through the process. But yeah, if you wanna start discovering how to begin to bake at home, like the crusty bread is probably the best place for you to start. Like I said, we'll show you a sourdough as the day goes here. We made it, you know, over the last couple days, so we shared that process with you. But crusty bread, if you wanna start out, it's really a low investment to get started. You just need the proper ingredients and then a Dutch oven. And I'll show that to you once we move into the kitchen. But make sure if you want to kind of start out on this journey, go check out our Everyday Breads cookbook. It's digital and printable. It prints beautifully. These are our favorite tried and true recipes. Like I make that pizza crust almost once a week or every 2 weeks, depending. And it's so good, and it's a favorite. Like we have tried so many different recipes over the years, and that is our favorite and our go-to. So you're gonna wanna try it. The brioche buns are the best burger buns ever. So check out that cookbook, we'll link it below. And the oven's heated up for something else because we're always baking stuff. But let's move into the kitchen. I wanna break down and simplify and make it so easy for you to check out the crusty bread. I'm gonna have it done today, and we'll have it available for dinner tonight. And then we'll walk you through just the perks of sourdough and what it looks like and all of that. And we'll also like make sure we incorporate and include like in the description the links to our sourdough resources and full instructional videos to help you through the process. None of this has to be scary. None of this has to be overwhelming. So grab your coffee or your tea or whatever you have, and let's move into the kitchen and make up crusty bread so we can have it for dinner. Okay, so we're in the kitchen. This is where I normally just throw together the bread, and actually most of the time it's Marie. She's behind the camera, but sometimes whoever is available will just throw it together. So it's that easy, anybody can do it. So for this crusty bread recipe, you're gonna want whatever flour you want. Today we're using organic all-purpose flour. Love as your standard, make sure you check them out. We really love supporting them, and that's where this flour is from. We're using our Redmond's real salt, also love them. You're gonna need some raw honey. You can use maple syrup too if you want. Some instant yeast, and then some warm water. And then we love these little bowls. Honestly, I just got this from, I think Walmart. I think the dollar store has some. They're stainless steel bowls though. I'm pretty sure I got this at Walmart. It's just the perfect size. I mean, you can see in relation to my hand here, but it's the perfect size for crusty bread. It just sets up so nicely in here. So it's so easy. It takes maybe like a few minutes to get this all put together. So we're gonna start with 3 cups of our flour. I have to measure it like Grandma Porter told me to measure it, which is what I'm doing. You gotta use the knife to get, I don't know why, like I can't not do it. Like Grandma made me do it, so I have to do it. My kids don't, not all my kids follow the rules. I think Marie does, but Julian doesn't. All right, so we have 3 cups of flour. We'll use a little bit more flour later for the kneading process, which is not kneading. I'm telling you, this is the easiest bread. Okay, so we put that in there like that. I have 2 teaspoons of our real salt, and I'm gonna put that actually on one side. You don't really wanna put like the salt and the yeast like together until you start mixing it, because you don't wanna, you know, deactivate your yeast. So we've got our salt in there. We're gonna do a heaping teaspoon of instant yeast. I might have to do a little bit more. I need to refill my yeast there. Okay, and then around a tablespoon of our raw honey. Okay, all right, and then we're gonna go for some good warm water. You don't want it so hot that you're gonna kill that yeast. You don't want it so cool that it's going to not activate your yeast. You know, I think it's like that 110, 115 degrees is what you're shooting for Fahrenheit. But eventually you just kind of figure out what it feels like, and you just, you know, you just do it. And I'm gonna do 1.5 cups of this water. And there is some flexibility to this recipe. Like if it is going to be a sticky dough, not a dry dough. So if it's too dry, maybe you were a little heavy-handed with the flour, you can just add in a little bit of water. But give it a second. It's gonna seem dry at first while you're incorporating all those ingredients together, but then it's gonna get sticky again. So I'm gonna add a splash more water, just a little bit, not too much. Okay, perfect. Do you see how it's sticky? It's not like a dough, it's not gonna even be like a dough ball yet. That's not gonna happen until the next stage of the process here. But it's gonna be a nice sticky dough. I wanna make sure that yeast is all incorporated throughout so that it'll rise up nice for us. But the beautiful thing of this, you don't have to get out your mixer. You can just throw it in a bowl. You can use your mixer if you want, but you don't need to. It's just really almost too sticky for that. And then all we're gonna do is cover it with some plastic wrap, put it somewhere like room temperature. Doesn't have to be hot or anything, but just room temperature. And then today, because I have time, I'm going to let it rise for the full 3 hours, and it can go longer than that. I mean, we've let it rise a lot longer than that, haven't we, Marie? Like hours and hours. So this is super easy. You're gonna let it sit for the 3 hours, and then I'll walk you through the next steps once we get there, and we'll talk about the Dutch oven in just a little bit. Okay, so it's time for our next step with our crusty bread. And again, the thing I love about this is if you wanna get this set up easily first thing in the morning, then by dinner time you've got fresh bread on the table, and it's hard to beat. And there's flexibility, so even if you don't get around to making your loaf of bread till lunchtime, you still have time to get fresh bread on the dinner table. So I've got my dough sitting here. You can see it's still sticky, super sticky. It doesn't do anything, it just continues to bubble. You can tell that the yeast is activated. All right, and so for this part, I'm gonna throw down just a little bit of flour in order to do our kneading. There's really no kneading in this bread. I would call it a no-knead bread really, because this is what we're doing. We're gonna take this, scrape it out, and just so I don't make more dishes, I'm gonna wash this bowl up too, but you can get a different bowl if you'd rather. Okay, I'm gonna get some real hot water going in here. Another little dusting of flour. And then all I'm gonna do is literally like 30 seconds, not even, of flipping and twisting and flouring so that it makes a nice dough ball. Okay, let me rinse my hands real quick. Okay, and then you are gonna want a piece of parchment paper, a piece big enough that will fit in your Dutch oven that you're using. So I'm gonna set that there. And then I'm just gonna move my flour, move my dough, sorry, floured dough, to the parchment. And then we're gonna take our dough ball here for our crusty bread, put it back in our bowl. The reason we do this is because you don't want that spreading. It is such a loose dough ball that it will continue to spread, and eventually it will ruin kind of the shaping of your loaf. So I'm gonna put this in here. I'm gonna set it back over on the stovetop in a nice, room temperature warm place. And we're gonna let this continue to rise in this state for the time that it takes, around an hour, between 45 minutes and an hour. But I'm gonna get my Dutch oven super duper hot, anywhere between like 30 minutes and an hour, it's up to you. But this can continue to sit longer than that. Again, there's flexibility with this loaf, but we shoot for setting it up, and then we're gonna take this over here. We're gonna use our Dutch oven. And this is well loved and well used. We use this for pretty much only bread because we have other ones. So I'm gonna use my Dutch oven pan. I will put it down in the description, the size of this pan. We've just been using it for so long that I don't remember. So I will leave that down below. But this pan with the lid on, I'm gonna put into the oven at 450 degrees and let this get smoking hot before we even put this dough in there. So I'm gonna do that right now. We're gonna put this in first. Get this up to 450. And definitely let that pan heat up super hot, like so hot. I don't know if it'll come through in the video, but that when I open the lid to put the bread in there, the dough ball in there, it's gonna steam, it's gonna be hot as can be, so be careful. So we're just gonna wait a little bit longer and we'll be ready to get that bread baking in the house and making the house smell amazing. So we'll be right back. All right, it's been about half an hour, 45 minutes. My pan has been heating up, getting nice and toasty and hot. The loaf, you can see, is still rising and bubbling. It looks really good. And we're gonna get this in, and it's so easy. So we've got, we're gonna pull this out. Just be careful. It's gonna be so hot. Like I said, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it, but it's gonna steam. You can just see the steam wafting out. All right, we're gonna put the parchment and everything in the pan. Close it up. Okay, and we're gonna set a timer for 30 minutes. At the end of that 30 minutes, when that goes off, I'm going to remove the lid from the Dutch oven and just put it up here. And then I'm also going to remove the parchment, and I'm gonna let the loaf toast for another 5 to 8 minutes. It really just depends on how crispy you want it and the color that you want it. So you can watch it. I mean, honestly, it's technically done baking at that point, but it's really nice to get that good crisp on the outside for that last 5, 7, 8 minutes. So that's what we're gonna do, and we are close to having delicious fresh bread on the table. So it's hard to beat homemade bread in any capacity, and that's why we're talking through this process, the difference between our sourdough bread and our crusty bread, and kind of why we do both and the differences and similarities between both. But right now we have beautiful loaves of sourdough here that Julianne has put together. Can you tell me, where are we at, just to help people along, where are we at in the process of sourdough loaf here?
So these are pretty much ready to go into the oven. All that I have to do is score them real quick. So I have already...
What does it mean to score them, just in case somebody doesn't know?
You take the knife and I'll show you actually. You
Here,
take
Marie.
your knife and you just kind of do like a little cut across this way and this way. You can do a bunch of different patterns, but I just like this one because it's simple and easy.
And it slices
And it
nicely.
slices well.
I mean, there's sourdough art out there where
People paint it.
They paint it, they do these beautiful, intricate details, and it's so fun and so cute. But on a daily basis, when we're doing sourdough, we don't, overthink it or have it be too fancy for us. We're just happy to have the delicious, fresh, homemade bread. So sourdough, even though it is a staple in our house, is definitely one of the types of bread that takes more time and a little bit more effort. I've already broken down crusty bread for everybody, but can you break down sourdough bread for everybody, start to finish, the whole process to get it on the table and ready to be eaten?
That, and I'm gonna say something real quick, is that a lot of people make out sourdough to be a very hard bread to make. It takes a lot of time, it's very labor intensive. I'm going to venture to say that's not entirely true. Really, the amount of actual hands-on time is not that much different than, like, say, our crusty bread. It just takes a little bit more rising time.
And that's what is the time consideration.
Yep.
So you started this yesterday.
Yes.
So why don't you walk me through the process with like the timeline from start to finish?
So yesterday morning, I put all of my ingredients into my mixer, just mixed it together, and then just covered it with a towel and let it sit on the counter for around 8-ish hours.
And for that, it's your flour.
So flour, water, salt, sourdough starter, and raw honey.
And so you combined that really well.
Yep.
And then you didn't do any kneading at that time.
I let the mixer do all the kneading, and I let it knead for anywhere between 3, 5, 7 minutes. Depends on when it looks good.
If you're new here, Julianne is like go with the flow, easy, take it as she goes.
Like, yeah, that looks about right. It looks smooth. It looks well. The gluten's built up well in there. It's all sticky and held together right.
So you put that all together, let it combine, cover it, set it on the counter, but then you also take care of your starter. So what do you do for that?
And then after I just take out the starter I use for the bread, I just feed it however much I took out. So I used a cup of starter for these 2 mini loaves. So I just put in a cup of water and a cup of flour and then mix it up and throw it back into the fridge for whenever I'm going to use it next.
Okay, so then it's on the counter, the dough is sitting there rising, first rise. What do you do? What's the next process?
Because of how I did it last night, I'm going to I let it rise on the counter out of the refrigerator for 8 hours. And then I put the bowl with just the towel on top into the fridge for another 8 hours.
Overnight.
So a little bit longer. It's not like the quickest way you can do it, but it's just how stuff worked out for the timing. So I let that do it for 8 hours in the fridge, and then I pulled it out. And then this morning I took the dough, turned it out onto the countertop, and then I shaped it into these 2 loaves here.
And I wouldn't say, because I was filming it this morning, right now we've got Marie behind the camera, but this morning I was filming, and just for those who are just learning and just starting out, it's not like you stood there and kneaded this. You folded it in, made a beautiful dough ball. Yep, and you prefer doing 2 small loaves. We do big loaves too. It just depends on what you're doing, but we like how these bake better. They bake evenly, and it's simple, and we have 2 Dutch ovens, so it's not like it's that big of a deal. Or if you have time, you can take turns in the oven. It doesn't matter. But you formed these. You put them back onto parchment.
Yep, I put them onto parchment, and then I left them on the counter for a few hours, and then I put it back in the fridge for the rest of the time until now. So that was roughly another 8 hours, like 4 hours on the countertop and then 4 hours in the fridge.
But start to finish, I would say it was around a little more than 24 hours of a process, just because you started yesterday morning, you formed the dough balls this morning, and now it's dinner time and we're ready to put them in the oven to have fresh bread hot out of the oven. You guys, if you haven't ventured into making your own homemade bread, first of all, it's easy, you can do it. Between this recipe of the sourdough or the crusty bread, we can link all these videos below that give you like step-by-step process to all of it, but it's not hard, and it's not just because it's good for us. That's not why we do it.
No, it's because it's the best bread
It's delicious. And I heard it said once that if you make your own homemade bread, it doesn't count as calories. Someone just said that to me recently. I was like, I will accept that as truth. Yeah. So anyway, so that's the process of the sourdough. Let's show this going into the oven, and we'll show the finished product so we can show the side by side. Honestly, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. If we score our crusty bread, it's hard to tell the difference between a crusty bread loaf, except when you do minis, they're smaller. Crusty bread and the sourdough, because they look very similar, unless you're doing fancy schmancy sourdough.
The crumb will be a little bit different. Like sourdough will be a hardier crumb, and the crusty bread tends to be a little bit fluffier.
When you cut it, you notice, and when you taste it, you notice. But they definitely are.
They're comparable.
They're comparable, in my opinion, on how much I like them.
Yes.
So, all right, let's get this in the oven, and then we'll show you the finished product.